Good evening. I hereby call to order the September 12th, 2018 meeting of the Mayfield Heights City Council. May I have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mr. Balestria.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mrs. Finney.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Tressi.
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening, and we changed the date of the meeting, so we have to do a little business first, and that would be ordinance number 2018-31, since Monday night was the Jewish holiday Rosh Hashanah. So first on our agenda, ordinance 2018-31, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chairman. 2018 dash, where are we? 31. Oh, it's up there, okay. An ordinance determining the reschedule of first regular meeting of council in September 2018 from Monday, September 10, 2018 to Wednesday, September 12, 2018. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. I don't think we have any discussion because we can't have the meeting without doing this. So, can we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes. Ordinance 2018-31 has been adopted. Next is approval of the meetings. We have several meetings to go through today. So we'll start with July 23rd, 2018. Has everyone had a chance to read them over? Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the special council meeting on July 23rd, 2018? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mr. Balestria. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved as written. Next, we'll go to the August 7th council meeting. Are there any could I have a motion, please, to approve? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to the minutes? Since there are none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
I wasn't here.
Mr. Mano abstain, and the ayes have it, and the minutes are approved as written. Next is a special council meeting on August 13th, 2018. Can I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Any changes or amendments or deletions to these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the minutes from August 13th stand approved. Next on our agenda is correspondence and announcements. I'd just like to announce that I have a new grandson, Miles Ross Finney Brown. Came 5 weeks early, but Grandma's fattening him up. Nana got him up like 10 ounces in 3 days, so he's doing well. Jessica and Joel are having a great time with them, so. And I think Mike might want to announce
Yes,
some-
I do have I have a grandson that was born 2 days ago as well. It's my 6th grandson. I have no girls. I guess no girls allowed. But yeah, my daughter had her 2nd grandson. His name is Maverick Alexander. He was 8 pounds, 8 ounces, 20 inches long, and he's a good baby so far. We're keeping our fingers crossed. So if I wasn't here tonight, I'd be there.
You have a daycare over there now, right? You got 2 of them all day.
Yep.
Mr. Manna?
On August 24th, my wife Sue and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mrs. Mano. She's in the audience. Anybody else? Any other good news? Mrs. Sabetta?
Good news, Chagrin River Watershed Partners trustee meeting is scheduled for September 18 at the Gates Mills Community Center at 4 p.m. All are welcome to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, then we'll go to reports of officers, starting with the mayor. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I trust everyone had a great summer, even though it's hard to believe it's over already. And it's almost as astonishing as the Browns almost beating the Steelers on Sunday. So we'll just leave that at that. As I reported before, WOW Internet is coming to the city. It's providing cable and internet services to the residents. At the end of August, the company began trimming trees and preparing for underground work. The company will have power units, about 17 power units throughout the city, and they have agreed to wrap those power units with a decorative wrap similar to what's outside City Hall. If you notice that box that's outside City Hall, so it makes it look a lot better than just a plain silver box. The company will pay for the 17 wraps, and they have started tagging doors for information for signing up for their services. So keep a lookout for that, and they will be throughout the whole city, so I'm sure everyone will be contacted. The fire department held the annual MDA Fill the Boot campaign over Labor Day weekend, and I'm proud to announce they collected over $24,000 for the cause. They probably got about $1,000 from me, since I traveled back and forth about 100 times while they were out there that weekend. We're fortunate to have such a motivated and compassionate bunch of guys who work for the fire department. The fall programs are underway in Parks and Recreation. The recreation booklet was mailed to residents during the last week of August and the first week of September. And the city services guide was updated and will be mailed to residents soon. The guide is a complete listing of important information and contact numbers, and is a great reference guide for our residents. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you, Madam President. Mayor, with this WOW Internet, WOW Internet, what is it?
Wow.
WOW Internet, this advertising on their boxes, will this be advertising, or will
It's not advertising. If you take a look at the box that's wrapped right in front of City Hall, it's actually a picture of the gazebo. And these wraps will be from, we've taken pictures of various places like the park, flowers around the city, the bocce fountain, and things like that. So it'll be those. No advertising. Yeah, it's just to make them more aesthetically pleasing.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for the mayor, Mrs. Snyder?
Mayor, I was just wondering if you're going to be having the Veterans Dinner again this November.
Yes, we are. Plans are well underway for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Teresi?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Mayor, where will these boxes go? I noticed that there's a box, like when you pull out of, I live on Fruitland, when you pull out, there's a box, maybe an electrical, from the electric company, I don't know. It's a big silver box, but it almost
It's in the right of way.
scares you. Yeah, almost. And that's
Yeah.
why I wondered where WOW will put their boxes. Will they be more considerate of the corners of the streets when people are pulling out?
Most of these will be in the right of way, but they have looked at them, and the service department and the building department have been working with them as to the placement.
Anything else for the mayor? If not, we'll move on to Director of Law, Mr. Murphy.
No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any questions of Mr. Murphy? Director of Finance, Mr. Tribby.
No report, but there's a couple items on the agenda which we will be happy to discuss when they come up.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Tribby? Okay, next on our agenda, are reports of committees, commissions, and boards. We'll start with the Building Committee, Mrs. Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The building committee did not meet over the summer, so I have no report.
Thank you, Mrs. Snyder. Are there any questions for Mrs. Snyder? Next, we'll move on to Finance and Audit Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Finance and Audit Committee met on July 31st at 6 p.m. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the Recreation Director's salary. Council should have the meeting minutes and the revised EOD from Mrs. Zeller. The committee felt that the council's job is legislative, and it is the mayor's job to give raises if merited. The committee recommended that the mayor evaluate the salary range for the recreation director, and if there are any changes, then it would come to council. There is no recommendation to council at this time. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Legislative Committee, Mrs. Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've had no meeting, so I have no report.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Teresi. Next, we'll move on to Public Works and Service Committee, Mr. Balestria.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have no report this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Balestria. Are there any questions for Mr. Balestria? Next, we'll move on to Parks and Rec Committee, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Don't miss out on LBJ basketball. This popular program for boys and girls has two groups, K1 and K1 first and second through third. New this year, we are introducing WLBJ basketball. Similar to our popular LBJ basketball, this all-girls program will be for grades 2 through 4. Registration opened for school district residents on 9/10 for both the LBJ and the WLBJ programs. Join us for a fun evening of intrigue as we discover the whodunit of the night. Don't miss out on our murder mystery dinner. This event sold out last year. This year's event will be on Saturday, October the 6th. Doors open at 6 p.m. The cost is $30 per person, and pre-registration is required. Dinner will include roast beef, potatoes, veggie, dessert, coffee, and water. Our September lunch bunch will be going to Oak and Embers in Chesterland on September the 26th at 11:30. If interested, a reservation must be made. The next adult afternoon out is October 9th with a new time, 4 to 6 p.m. The theme is Harvest Fling Dinner and Movie. We will be serving chicken cordon bleu, twice baked potatoes, veggies, dessert, and coffee, and we will be showing The Notebook from 2004 starring Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams and James Garner. It is sponsored by Highland Point. Bus trips. We still have spots available on our bus trip on Saturday, the November 20th to Ramshire Farm. The trip will depart at 9:30 a.m. and return 4 p.m. The cost is $40. Get your pumpkin patch on as we take a Saturday trip to Ramshire Farms. The farm has a little bit of everything: pumpkin patch, mazes, food, and entertainment. Following the festivities at the farm, we will stop for lunch at the Broken Rock Cafe and Bakery. All participants will get lunch on their own, max 24. Young at Heart Adult Halloween Party, 10/23. $10 pre-registration is required, 3 to 5 p.m. Why let the kids have all the Halloween fun? Join us in costume if you wish. You'll get an extra raffle ticket for ghoulish games and freaky fun. We will provide heavy appetizers, prizes, and giveaways, a photo booth, DJ Jammin' Joel, and more. Mayfield Heights Kids Halloween Party is scheduled for Saturday, October 27th at the Dijon Community Center. There is one session from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Tickets go on sale September 24th. The cost is $7 per person, must be purchased in advance. Wildcat Sport and Fitness has some great new programs. If you have not checked out the Fall Winter Community Recreation Guide, visit our website or stop by for more information. For any information on any recreational program, please call the office at 442-2627, or check the website and select Parks and Recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Any questions for Mr. Mano?
I have a question.
Mayor?
What was the second thing you said? No, I'm just kidding.
I think I made one mistake on November, I meant to say October.
And we'll move on to safety and transportation. Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. Just one thing I want to remind residents. The motto in our police department is hear it, see it, and report it. So you are the eyes and ears of the police department, an extension of the police department. So if you see something, please call, even if you think it's irrelevant. It could be something. Fire Chief Bruce Elliott is here tonight and would like to make a couple of announcements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Members of council, I just wanted to give a few items to report on regarding the fire department. I'm happy to report that the fire department received a grant from FEMA this year. It was actually FY fiscal year 2017. We were awarded $133,000, and that money will go to buy the fire department new air packs. The current air packs we have are over 10 years old, and they've met all the needs, and we were able to receive some funding from FEMA to replace those. I would also like to thank Joe Fernaro in the service department. They've been going around painting fire hydrants and making them look real nice. If you notice at the north end of the city, the fire department, the fire hydrants over there are nice and red, and they've been doing a great job on maintaining those for us and painting them. But unfortunately, it's time to kick off the fire hydrant flushing season. So I know we get calls on this, but just wanted to remind everybody that this is an important thing that we do. We have to assure that the fire hydrants out there are in working order. Every year we find problem hydrants, and we report on all those hydrants, and at the end of the season, we send down that list to Cleveland Water, and then Cleveland Water sends out crews to start making repairs and replace a lot of those. If you notice, in the last few years, we've had a really good response from Cleveland Water. You may have noticed a lot of new hydrants being replaced over the last few years. So it is important. I just want to remind you and the residents listening, if the water is a little bit brown, yellow, looks a little stirred up, just turn on the cold water and let it run until it runs clear. We don't want to run the hot water because you don't want it to go into your hot water tank, and then just run the cold water until it runs clear, and you'll be good to go with that. If you do have some clothes in the wash and it does get discolored, call our office and we'll make arrangements to get you some materials to take care of that. If you've been watching the news, you know that there's a pretty good sized hurricane hitting the coast of North Carolina in the next couple days. I think it's a good time to discuss that September is National Preparedness Month. It's always been that way. Last year I kind of made the same announcement. Even though we don't live on a coast, we do feel the hurricanes over the years. If you remember, Hurricane Sandy hit our area pretty hard, and we were actually able to receive some FEMA money to help Mayfield Heights during that time due to some damages and power outages and what have you. So it is a good time to review your preparedness plan. If you go to ready.gov, there is some materials and tools that can help you in preparing for any kind of national disasters that we might have. And then lastly, kind of piggyback off what the mayor said regarding the Fill the Boot campaign. I just wanted to thank administration for their support and also thank the residents for their generosity during the Fill the Boot campaign. This just kind of give you a little bit of a background. The Fill the Boot campaign has been a nationwide fire department initiative for over 60 years. Fire departments get out there and fill the boot, and that money goes to help fight muscular dystrophy. So I'm very proud of the fact that Mayfield Heights has always been a very generous community and has helped us greatly in raising money and donating money to those in need. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Belstria.
Thank you. Chief, I just noticed coming up Warden that there's a hydrant laying on its side. I don't know if it's been there. It looks like it might have been there for a while. I don't know if you were aware of it. I just want to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, we did get a call from the resident, and we have been in touch with Cleveland Water on that. And so hopefully, working with Cleveland Water is not always a speed issue, so we do have to be a little bit patient, but it has been reported and we are aware of it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we'll move on to Board of Zoning, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Board of Zoning met September 11th, which was last night. 2 items were on the agenda. One was tabled due to a no-show, and the other will be on the September 24th council agenda. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Next, we'll move on to Planning Commission, Mr. Balestria.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Planning Commission didn't meet, but we are back in session, and we have one item on the agenda for next Monday. And that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Are there any questions for Mr. Balestria? Okay, next, we'll move on to the public portion of the meeting. Pursuant to City Code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes allowed for the whole entire public portion. Although it is not a time for public debate, this is your opportunity to address council with your concerns or questions. Please know that no personal attacks or comments will be allowed. Also, if you are here in a connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address the council. If you would like to be heard this evening, please raise your hand and be recognized, then approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. Also, please make sure you speak directly into the microphone. It is now 7:24. I will open the public portion. Mr. Rinker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Bruce Rinker. I'm from the law firm of Mansur Gavin, 1001 Lakeside Avenue in Cleveland, Suite 1400. And I'm land use counsel for CA Senior Living Holdings LLC, and speaking to Ordinance 2018-32, which is on your agenda tonight. Exactly 6 months ago today, we were here when council voted its approval for a number of variances involving the site plan. And if I can, I'd like to orient everyone, just because I know that this has been dormant for quite a while in terms of how council has or has not been looking at it, and aware that the law director provided a memorandum, and I thought if I could fill in some of the points, some of the context, I thought that would be useful. First, I'm going to show you one of the site plan drawings just to orient us, and I'm even going to try to see if Google Maps might help here. This is the site plan. I've indicated to the south is Cedar Road, north is at the top. This is Lander Haven Drive. You can see that this covers a pretty large area, but the one area that would not be developed is the purpose of the legislation. And excuse me for rather crude drawing, but I tried to orient as far as the Lander Haven condominiums. 2 representatives spoke to council regarding their concerns about what the future life would be for the woods at the east end of the site. And I can kind of see if this comes up. Too far. I had this a minute ago. Here we are. If that pulls up enough. There, that probably is as good as we can get. Where I'm pointing right here, this is the block that forms the Lander Haven condominiums. We've gotten a 3D. Here's Cedar Road, and then this is the area of wooded acreage, and it's roughly 1.5 acres. So that was their concern. They wanted to make sure that that would not be disturbed. And we can refer to the minutes from March 12th, but by paraphrasing, Mr. Silverstein spoke to the point. He said, we want to make sure there'd be no development there. We want to preserve these woods in perpetuity. He had a couple of other issues, one of which was putting evergreen trees along the east margin of the driveway that is part of the kind of the ring road around the whole facility. And he had another item, but the 2 items that council looked at involved the woods and then this landscaping feature. Another representative from the condominium association echoed Mr. Silverstein's comments. There was Mr. Silverstein and then Mr. Rosenthal. And again, jointly, they did not want the land to be developed. So council at the time amended the motion, and the reference was made that it would be a park. We looked at that, and we had indicated to council, the client indicated, we'll put some deed restriction on here in order to serve those needs. Since that time, on closer inspection, we felt and still feel that the conservation easement that's been proposed is superior to simply calling something a deed restriction. And there are a couple of points, one of which is the city is seen as the grantee of the property. So this is done according to the Ohio Revised Code. It'll be recorded. It's enforceable. The city enforces it. If there's any opportunity in the future where for some reason there needs to be some modification, it's only going to be modified if the city agrees to it. And I thought that just even reading, it's kind of a litany when you look at all of the items that are included, specified in this conservation easement. In fact, each one of these is a deed restriction. So it starts with, and I'll run through it quickly, no buildings, billboards, mobile homes, or other structures of any kind, either temporary or permanent, shall be placed on or erected on the property, There's no subdivision, no excavation, no building of roads. You can't go in with Agent Orange, pardon the pun, but the idea is that if you have to go in to spray any invasive plants or whatever, that's something that's got to be coordinated appropriately. No garbage, no dumping, in other words. No timbering. The grantee, meaning the city, reserves the right to post or clearly mark the boundaries of the property. No commercial or any other activity. So it's very comprehensive. We think that this provides the best protection, and this is something that our client has willingly agreed to. So to sum everything up, we think this more than satisfies the concern of the residents. It gives the city great control over the future of this area. And as I pointed out, in addition, you can see on the landscape plan that the city has approved, this whole area will additionally be buffered with a double row of trees. And the whole plant list is something that had to be vetted through the city. So when you put it all together, we clearly believe that this more than satisfies not only the concern, but probably even beyond the concerns that any of the residents would have had. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I appreciate your giving us the time.
Thank you, Mr. Rinker. When we get to that agenda item, if there's any questions, we'll call you back up. Anybody else like to be heard this evening? Back row. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Mark Silverstein. I live at 2205 Lander Haven Court. I appreciate the comments that Mr. Rinker just made. Unfortunately, we didn't really have a chance to talk about anything in advance of this, but I did receive a copy. I'm also speaking to that resolution that will be on your agenda later this evening, Resolution 2018-54, concerning the proposed conservation easement. The law director was kind enough to send me a copy of the proposed conservation easement, and after reviewing the draft, I have a few comments that I'd like to put out for your consideration. I should say that we are very much in favor of the conservation easement and the concept. In fact, probably when I first became aware of CA Senior Living's plan, and they had even before they presented it to you all, and the committee process, I went to a informational meeting many months ago that they had at Executive Caterers, and I threw out the concept of some sort of leaving that acre-and-a-half portion undisturbed, and even threw out the notion of some sort of a conservation easement. So, through your process, it ended up being initially a deed restriction, and I'm not surprised in some ways that the developer came to the concept of a conservation easement, because it frankly is a little more of a win-win situation. It gives us the protections that we need, and in addition, there's some tax advantages that they can get as well. So I just, my thoughts are really to go and do some things that I think will, certainly from my perspective as a resident of Lander Haven Court, further the purpose that's stated in paragraph 1 of the conservation easement. If you, when you get to the resolution and you look at the easement, you'll see that the purpose that's stated in paragraph 1 is, quote, to assure that the property will be retained forever in its natural forested and scenic condition, and to prevent any use of the property that will impair or interfere with the preservation of the property in that condition. So please know that the comments I'm about to make are all geared towards, beefing up or punching up the proposed easement a little ways to further that purpose. And the reason I'm even proffering these suggestions is because there was a case decided in 2009 by the Ohio 9th District Court of Appeals over Lorain County called Zagrins versus Ehrlich, 2009-Ohio-2942. In that case, there were a group of residents who each on their property put a series of conservation easements on their properties, and they granted that to the Lorain County Metropolitan Park District, which the goal was to place perpetual easements on portions of their respective properties. Later on, one of those landowners sold their property to some other people, and those people then went and had discussions with the Lorain County Metro Parks, and they entered into a modification of the easement that whereby basically there was a swap where a portion of the person's property that had not been restricted was made restricted in exchange for releasing from the restriction the portion that the easement had restricted. And the purpose was to build a house on the portion that had previously been subjected to the restriction. Some of the other adjacent homeowners who had put restrictions on their property went into court to try and prevent that from happening, and ultimately the decision by the Court of Appeals is that they had no standing in order to bring that lawsuit.
Mr. Silverstein, we're going to have to ask for a motion to give you 5 more minutes to speak.
Okay.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Snyder, seconded by Mr. DeJohn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
You have 5 more minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel. As I said, as a result, we would like to be able to avoid that kind of situation from happening here, which leads to my specific concepts. Number one is we would like to have some language added that would make Lander Haven Condominium Association, the unit owners of Lander Haven Court, and maybe some other third parties at your discretion. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody other than myself at this point. So that to make sure that it's clear that they are intended, the word would be intended third-party beneficiaries of the conservation easement. If you were to read that Zagrin's decision that I cited, it noted the importance of being designated as a third-party beneficiary. That's the legal term, because in the absence of specific language, even though those people would have clearly benefited from the easement, they were deemed to be by the court only incidental beneficiaries. So we would like to see some third-party beneficiary language so that we in the future would have a better possibility of enforcing, the interests that we have. And I proposed some language in an email that I sent a little earlier today to the law director and to Councilman Balestrella. And I'll be happy to share that, Bruce, with you if you haven't already seen it. So that's the first change, would be to reference specifically the intended third-party beneficiary. Secondly, and I say this very with the utmost respect here, the grantee is the council of the city of Mayfield Heights. And while we know that everyone here on all sides, council and the developer, have the best of intentions and want to foster the purpose of the stated purpose in paragraph 1 of the easement. In order to prevent against a future council that might have other concerns, I respectfully suggest that perhaps the stated purpose would be better ensured if the grantee were a different entity, such as a nonprofit land conservancy instead of the council. So I throw that out at least for your consideration. And third and last change that I would, third, last change that I would propose would be in relating paragraph 9E regarding modification. There's language that on its face would seem to protect against modifications that are inconsistent with the stated purpose. But the Zagrins case, and frankly other cases and other instances of which I'm aware through my legal practice, have shown that it might be better to beef up the language of paragraph 9E, since the grantor and the grantee, whoever the grantee is, could agree between themselves to modify the modification language so as to even delete the proviso in 9E that says you can't do anything to inconsistent with the purpose. So for the avoidance of doubt, I propose some language again in my email to the law director that I would propose for your consideration, which would make it clear that you can't modify any attempt to modify the easement that in a way that would avoid the restriction or overrule the restriction would be null and void.
Sir, you have only 2 more minutes, okay?
Fine. The last thing I want to say is there was one typo in the easement in paragraph 2A, which I pointed out. So that's inconsequential. So in sum, we have no objections to the concept of a conservation easement. Rather, we think that the proposed language can be tweaked to better effectuate the protections intended by the parties. And thank you very much for your consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions now or any other time this evening if you have them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Silverstein. Okay, next, anyone else like to speak from the audience? Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion at 7:39. Well, you'll have a chance when we get to that agenda if needed. Okay, next we'll move to resolutions. We will begin with resolution 2018-53. Mr. Murphy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2018-53, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county fiscal officer.
Thank you,
First
Mr.
reading.
Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call, please, on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mrs. Teresi. Any discussion? Bob?
You all received the memo that I sent to you. This is the authorization to levy the 10 mills of our property tax, which has been in place since 1951. Does not result in any changes in the rates. It just distributes some money to the bond retirement fund to pay off some of our notes.
Thank you, Mr. Tribby. Can we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Resolution 2018-53 has been adopted. Next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-54. Mr. Murphy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2018-54, a resolution modifying the variance granted by Resolution 2018-11, amended, adopted April 9, 2018, granting to Matt Buma on behalf of CA Senior Living Holdings, LLC, 6200 Lander Haven Drive, to eliminate the requirement for a 6-foot masonry buffer wall on the easterly 170 feet of the south property line in order to preserve mature existing vegetation already acting as a buffer. Cuyahoga County permanent parcel numbers 863-26-008, 863-26-009, 863-27-007, 863-27-008, 863-27-009, 863-27-010, 863-27-011, 863-27-012, 863-28-007, 863-28-008, 863-28-009. By establishing contingencies, including a requirement for a permanent conservation easement, declaring an emergency. First
Thank you,
reading.
Mr. Murphy. You need a drink of water after that one. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Just point of order.
Yes, Mr. Villastream.
Did we not discuss or at least take up ordinance 2018-32, and I'll direct it to Mr. Murphy, prior to approving or amending or discussing the resolution?
Not necessarily, because this would change in order to provide for a conservation easement. If the conservation easement is not approved,
Correct.
then it goes back to the original variance grant, and this resolution is null and void. I sat there and I thought, which one should go first,
Well,
the chicken or the
usually
egg?
you would approve the ordinance, I would imagine
And
first.
decided the resolution should go, because that's the way the resolutions go. You could go either way, but either way would be fine.
Thank you. Okay, so we have, I think, Mrs. Sabetta. Do we have a second for suspension? Mr. Belstria. Roll call, please, on the suspension.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belastria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Belastria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Ms. Finney, I'd like to hear from Mr. Rinker on his take on Mr. Silverstein's proposal, representing the applicant, and see what their take on it would be.
I think he's ready to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belastria.
Well, thank you, and I guess I would ask that collectively we try to revisit the discussion at the time. Bear in mind, this is property that's zoned for residential development. The idea was to be able to contain a different kind of development, and that's why all the variances were approved for this particular use. The concern, as we understood it, and as the minutes reflect, were just, don't mess with these woods. And the general discussion was, well, then we would agree to a restriction where we would agree we have no intention of doing that. The idea of a conservation easement, I think, as I said before, really goes beyond council's vote. The council discussion was much more generic. Keep it a park. Let's keep it woods. This is private property. We haven't transacted the property with the condominium association, and we can understand their desire to maintain this. But the fact of the matter is, this is private property. This is on the tax duplicate. Our client's going to be paying the taxes, the increased property taxes. There are a lot of factors of private property ownership that come into play here. But to respect our neighbors, the idea of a conservation easement is plainly set forth here. Evidently, there was an earlier draft where the council was made the grantee. We amended that to make it the city. So if you stop and think about it, it's not this council or some other council. It's the city proper over time that will have the responsibility of oversight to make sure that these residents concerned, and after all, that's what cities do. So what we're asking respectfully is accept this on its face for what it is. It provides far more specific protection than anything was requested. And it's great to parse this down into some other case where there were individual property owners that dealt with the metro parks. I have no idea what the circumstances were there, but I think we can all appreciate that the discretion that public officials have, knowing that they're answering to an electorate, is to make sure that land use policies are managed in a very reasonable way. And this gives you that specific responsibility. It names the city as the one who is going to ensure that the concerns of these residents in the condominium association are going to be met, and at the same time respects the fact that we have private property rights. We have responsibilities to maintain. After all, if there's some problem, something happens on this site, whether we cause it or not, our client's going to be responsible to repair it. Who's going to make sure? The city of Mayfield Heights is going to make sure. And this list that we provide gives very specific bases for the city to make sure that they are enforced. So that's why I say I think it's superior, and I think it's more than adequate, and we would ask that you support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rinker. Any other questions? Mr. Murphy?
If I may, just a point of response also. The points that were made by Mr. Silverstein, as addressed by Mr. Rinker, the grantee has been changed. It's not the council of the city of Mayfield Heights. That was an earlier draft. It is the city of Mayfield Heights, and the city would be the grantee who would enforce the terms of the conservation easement. Secondly, I did see your email not until just before the meeting, so I haven't had a chance to look at the 9th District case, but it is a 9th District. It's not in our district, and I'm not sure it's on point the way you described it anyway. But be that as it may, I will look at that. The easement as proposed is not attached to the legislation. It is something that I would have to approve as law director. So council can approve this legislation this evening if they would like, and we can revisit the language at some point. But I will tell you, I'm satisfied with the language as it is. There is one other change that was made in there that basically provides that there may be changes in the future, but it would have to be between the city and the property owner, who are the proper parties. So I'm satisfied with it, but I will look at it to see if it merits any further changes. But I would advise council that you can look if you feel that you want to substitute the conservation easement for the restricted covenant, which I think is superior. I agree with Mr. Rinker. Then you can vote yes on this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mrs. Tracy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have one concern, as we talked about council in the future not having the ability, because council could change. How about the city changing? And then this restriction or easement could change as well. And I think that number 3 on Mr. Silverstein's request, the ability for the grantee or grantor to modify the easement, I think that might be of concern also. I think that's a valid point. Can it be added to this conservation easement?
Mr. Murphy?
I'm not sure. It is there that the grantor and the grantee can modify it, because I would be hesitant to bind a council 20 years from now to something if circumstances change. But it would still be something that the city has absolute control over if it wanted to make a change or not. Similar to a restrictive covenant, but I think the conservation easement is much stronger because it provides the city with control. It will be recorded, and the city is the grantee, and the city owns the conservation easement, that portion of the property anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, roll call, please, Lisa. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. DeJohn?
So, Mr. Murphy, when you say the city has control of that, is it the council or is it the mayor, or both?
Ultimately, it's the council. If there's going to be any changes made, it will be the city council. And it does, the original draft did specifically delineate a city council as a possible grantee of a conservation easement, but I think it is stronger for the city to have the city as itself as the grantee rather than the council, although council has to approve it anyway. But maybe 6 of one,
That-
half
and
dozen
that's
of
why
the
I
other.
asked.
Yeah.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Lisa.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belistria?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes, Resolution 2018-54 has been adopted. Next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-55. Mr. Murphy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2018-55, a resolution authorizing the mayor to submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and Local Transportation Improvement Programs and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Could I please have a roll call on the motion to suspend?
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belistria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Discussion, Mayor, anything to add?
Thank you, Madam President. I think it's, the resolution itself is pretty self-explanatory, and there also is a letter from Dan Gerson, memo, explaining that we would like to submit an application for a grant.
Mr. Balestria?
Maybe the mayor can address my question, or maybe Mr. Fernaro. I was reading the memo from Mr. Gerson that the city will be asking for $350,000 from OPWC. And Mayor, I don't know, if we have any experience that if we ask for that certain amount, would that amount just be denied in total, or could they possibly grant the city a portion of that? You know, I'm not sure.
As far as this
specific grant works.
specific grant goes, I'm not sure if we've had any history with it. I'd asked Joe or Dan to answer that question, if we've applied and whether they would modify the grant application or not.
This is the first we're dealing with.
Well, we did.
No?
No, we did apply before, but we were turned down.
Okay.
Mr. Gerson?
Yes, so the grant is OPWC. We applied last year for Lander Road. Unfortunately, we didn't get any grant funding. I'm not familiar with all their ways they do it, but from what I understand, if they don't grant you the $350 in terms of a grant, sometimes they offer it into a 0% loan. And at that case, if they did offer you the loan, you could either deny or accept it. So at this point, we're trying to get some funding for the road that we're planning on doing. It's an application that's pretty easy to do, so we're hoping to get some money for it. So.
Mr. Balestria?
Dan, was that the amount that, the maximum amount we could apply for, or was that just an amount you felt that we were able to apply for?
Yeah, it's kind of so the more you ask for, the less points you get, and there's a lot of factors into how they rate it. One is the condition of the road. The condition of the road is it's average to poor, so it's not reconstruction. You get more points for that. The other thing is the financial ability of the city. The worse you are, the more points you get. Health and safety. So if there's a lot of accidents, the worse it is, the more accidents you get, the more points you get. So if you ask for more money, you lose those points. So we're hopeful that, seeing as we're asking for 350 instead of a larger amount, that'll give us more points. So there's a bunch of factors that go into it. So
A give and take. so to
Correct.
speak. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Gerson. Do we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mr. Belistria?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes, Resolution 2018-55 has been adopted. Next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-56. Mr. Murphy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2018-56, a resolution authorizing the mayor to issue a purchase order to Statewide Ford for the purchase of 3 vehicles for the police department. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Could we please have a roll call on the motion to suspend?
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mr. Mano. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please, Lisa.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes, Resolution 2018-56 has been adopted. And next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-57. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2018-57, a resolution determining the premises known as 1157 Sunset Road, Mayfield Heights, Ohio, Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 861-16-048, to be a public nuisance, authorizing the mayor to issue a purchase order for the demolition of the single-family dwelling and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Roll call, please, on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Discussion. Mayor, anything you want to add to this?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
I think so, too. Can we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Resolution 2018-57 has been adopted. And next on our agenda are ordinances. First on our agenda is ordinance 2018-29. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance number 2018-29, an ordinance amending Chapter 121 of the Codified Ordinances of the City titled Council by amending Section 121.02R, voting. Third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I would like to recommend that ordinance 2018-29 be tabled and send it over to legislation, Mrs. Teresi, because we have some notes and I think we need to further discuss this. So can I have a second, please, Mrs.
Second.
Teresi? Okay, can I have a roll call, please, Lisa, to table the item?
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes, ordinance 2018-29 has been tabled, and Mrs. Teresi, could you try to arrange it that we could all be there maybe, or a
Yes,
few
I
of us?
will. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank
I think
you
that's
so
a great
much.
idea.
Okay, next is ordinance 2018-32. Mr. Murphy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance number 2018-32, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to accept a permanent conservation easement from CA Senior Living Holdings LLC or its successors or assigns across Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 863-28-009 and part of parcel number 863-28-008 in order to restrict the development of the property and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Roll call, please, on the motion to suspend the rules.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. I think we've had a lot of discussion. Anyone have anything to add? We heard from a resident and Mr. Rinker. Not? Okay, can we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Belistria,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes, ordinance 2018-32 has been adopted. There are no motions this evening, so we'll move on. Is there any new business or comments from council? Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to urge this council to appeal to the mayor to look in to taking legal action against the state of Ohio for that 452-foot cell tower or communications tower that they want to put by the Cloverleaf 271 in Mayfield by Golden Gate. This is going to be a monstrosity tower, and it's going to look horrible in our city. So I want to appeal to all of you to contact the mayor and ask him to look into taking legal action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Actually, I'd like to make a comment that the mayor has been working, I know for a fact, and I worked hard, and I checked into every person I knew in the state of Ohio, including the governor's office. And there was nothing the mayor could do. By the time he got the contract, they already decided this is where it was gonna go. And if we do decide to sue the state of Ohio, I think that would be kind of silly. So we don't want the tower. Nobody wants it. Mayor, you have anything you'd like to add? Because I know you've worked hard to get rid of this.
Yeah, and I appreciate Mr. DeJohn's sentiment, and none of us want it, that's for sure. There's no resident in the city who would say, oh, it's okay to be there. We did find out that the lease was signed in January, and they came to us in late May. So we did find that out, and I have been working with all the connections I have to try and find an angle. But I would be more than happy to discuss this with our legal director and see how he feels about taking legal action against the state. I have no problem with that.
Thank you. Mrs. Teresi?
Mayor, have you addressed moving it? I mean, one near Harvard is right on the freeway. Couldn't they move the location to, as you're going up the ramp? There's plenty of green space closer to the highway than for it to be right in the area that they're looking to put it in. If they moved it and it would be away from residents, it would make more sense. I mean, they won't listen to you, or have you approached that, or?
Well, yeah, well, we stated it at that meeting. You were at the meeting that,
Yes, yeah.
that we had, and will they listen to me? No. I mean, they really, basically, they've made up their mind. That's where it's going. I think the best thing that the residents of the city could do is really make a stink about this to everybody they can think of, as I have and as some members of council have. The more noise we make, I think the better chance we have, but time is growing very short. I think who knows what, they won't share a building timeline with us, or they haven't yet. So I think the best thing the residents can do is really let their voices be heard as loud as possible to as many people as possible.
I've had numerous emails and phone calls about it, and
So have I. Yeah.
people are really upset about it, and many of the residents feel that we're not doing enough to either stall the building of it or asking them to move it, which is why I'm bringing that solution up. Let's move it to a different location. If we have to have it, couldn't they put it where it wouldn't be as offensive? It would be closer to the highway. Somehow they did it, going south near Harvard. It's,
Well, that's not the same tower. It's not on the same
No.
line of communication.
No, I
Right.
understand that,
Yeah.
but it is closer to the highway than it is,
I don't think
right away.
Yeah, I think there's not enough room to put it anywhere but those clover leaves for the amount of land that they need on ODOT property. Is there some other property on that line that's private? And they went over that conversation with us. They made the point that spot on the clover leaf is as far east as they want to go. So they would have to go west down Mayfield Road, and you were there when they said, you know, they approached
Lyndhurst.
Lyndhurst, but that was on, if it was on our property, we could say no. Lyndhurst had the opportunity to say no. Unfortunately, ODOT property, we don't have that option, so.
You know, and I spoke to, from the governor's office, every connection, and they said that the mayor really was just not real, it was disrespectful to our city. Because if it was signed in January and we didn't know about this till May, I mean, that was 5 months that we might have been able to work with them. It was too late, essentially, when we got this.
Well, I thought at the meeting we stated that we knew in March that they were gonna do this, yeah.
They
think it was-
signed that in January.
Yeah, I think it
Right.
was May when we had the first meeting with them, I believe.
And has, Mr. Barnes done anything? Has he pulled any strings and?
Well, he's one of the people we're talking to, and he was at the meeting, so you know what happened at that meeting, so.
Yes, I do. Thank
Madam
you.
President?
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes. Just today, I did speak to ODOT, and this week I did speak to Representative Barnes, and he did say that it looks tight, but he's behind us, whatever the city decides to do. But we would have to all be on the same page with that. And when I spoke to ODOT, they do not have a construction schedule. They said because their application in the FAA and the FCC hasn't been approved yet. The ODOT itself also has an aviation department that they need to go through and an environmental. So they are in this process, and while they're in this process, it might be important for us to get involved in that process to see that the risk factor, so they understand the risk factor of our hospital, the height. The gentleman did explain in the beginning of the meeting, the last meeting, that he went to 7 places, 9 places, and they were private. What I specified today when I spoke to ODOT was that the gentleman who spoke to us said that he made a personal decision to go to ODOT. So that makes me think not all of them are on the same page. They signed a lease and they're still working on it.
Thank you,
Madam
Mrs. Sabetta. Mrs. Snyder?
I spoke to Representative Barnes as well, and he said some of the same things that you're saying. And is there a way that we can have, like we've had invited people to council before, can we invite some of these representatives
I
to
think
show the
maybe we could
people-
have a town hall meeting, something to that
Or
effect, not at a
we-
council meeting though. But a town hall
Problem is
meeting and ask them to
We can't get people
come.
there. It seems like it's,
ODOT.
yeah.
Mr. Mano?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, given how disoriented and ill-prepared that group of folks were that came to that meeting, I think they're ripe for the picking. I think we can make a case because those guys, first of all, they knew nothing about this city and where they were going to put that tower. They didn't know the difference between Golden Gate Shopping Center and Golden Gate Road. I mean, these guys were so ill-prepared. It was ridiculous. And I think that that would be a good point to make as far as starting to fight this thing. You know, even to invite them back here for something, to me, that's a waste of time because they don't have any interest in our situation because it's a done deal as far as they're concerned. So they're just paying lip service. They're going to just say what they think they can say and get away with and get out of here with their scalps. So I would just consider using that past presentation as a starting point. I mean, who are these guys and what kind of authority do they hold and so on and so forth. But I'd be opposed to having them come back here to do any kind of a town hall because they didn't know what the heck they were talking about in the first place.
I have to agree with Mr. Mano, but I think it's really worth it to give it a shot still if the residents, I mean, they've gotten calls and emails, I've been told, and none of us want this. It's just a matter of, is it worth fighting it? Mrs. Teresi, do you have something to add?
Excuse me, I was just gonna say, maybe, the residents and council, the mayor should really go right to McKay Brothers. If you go to their, I don't know if anyone else has gone to their website, but they have done this in so many cities and countries, and maybe they're the people that we should be going to. We can't change ODOT's mind, but maybe we can work with, I didn't catch the gentleman's name that evening. He seemed a little bit scattered. But if we could go to them and inundate them with phone calls, emails, and maybe they'll make some consideration.
Good suggestion, worth a shot.
ODOT isn't gonna do anything. They're gonna get $60,000 a year. Money talks, and they don't care about the
Do
residents.
you have any
but-
connections there or no?
At ODOT?
No, with that company.
You know, I really, long before the meeting, when I realized it was McKay Brothers, I read all of their literature. If you go online and look at their website, it's quite extensive, and they have done this everywhere. They have towers of all different sizes and all different countries, and it's all about, you know, getting information to everyone faster. It's all microwave, it's not fiber optic. I mean, it's all the new technology that everybody wants with all of this, you know, the phones, et cetera, and it's all finance. So you understand that part of it, but I still think that they may be the source that we should go to and berate with, you know.
Madam President.
Mayor, it's worth a shot to at least give it a call, why not?
I think everybody needs to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, the more
Everyone
that-
needs to do it.
Go on that site, and the more they hear, the more people they hear from, including council, residents.
Exactly.
The more it's gonna help.
Emails, phone calls, just keep it up that, you know, we don't want this, consider moving it, consider, you know, consider something else. ODOT will still get their money, but let's see where else we can put it.
Mr.
What else
DeJohn?
we can do.
Representative Barnes said that he wanted to see ODOT come and talk with us. Has anything else been done with that?
They say it's a done deal.
Well, but Representative Barnes demanded that ODOT come and speak with us.
Mayor?
It's their choice whether they come, and so far they've chose not to.
Okay, we all set now? Mrs. Snyder?
I just feel like this is the whole gas well thing again. And I do, and I feel like I remember when we had all these people coming to our council meetings and approaching us to put gas wells in our parks and all around the city. We fought it in some areas. We actually walked with the representatives. We walked on the property, and it gave a sense of how much we cared about our city. And I don't see why we can't have, they're coming in our city and disappointing all of our residents.
But they own the land, we own that land, that's the difference.
I know, I just feel like,
Yeah.
like you said, I think we all need to push a little bit harder and invite them out. We'll walk, we'll put our boots on and go out in the middle of winter. Show them the other areas that are possibilities, just like we did before. I think it's worth a shot.
Thank you. Well, everybody at home, start making phone calls, emails, texting. Maybe we can get this taken care of. Do you have a motion to adjourn, please?
No, Madam President, if
Oh.
I could, on a
Oh,
much,
sure, Mayor.
on a much lighter note, I just wanted to congratulate the police department on their 5th Citizens Police Academy that kicked off last night. There was about 20 people there, wasn't there? Or 18? 16. So it was a big group, as a great program, and I commend the chief and the police department for continuing that program. And it was great to be there and welcome them last night.
Thank you, Chief. Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mrs. Snyder, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are now adjourned. Thank you for joining us this evening.